Whisper in the dark, a story of truth and consequence. The whispers haunted Elise Mercer long after she left the mansion. Sometimes late at night she still heard them, faint voices behind locked doors, crying out in the darkness. But no one believed her. No one wanted to believe her. If this story shocked you, subscribe. Because the next one is even more incredible. Los Angeles 2023. The mansion loomed like a monolith against the twilight sky, its windows glowing amber against the encroaching darkness. Elise smoothed the front of her uniform, plain black pants and a white button-down shirt, the unofficial uniform of the invisible worker. 6 months into her job as a housekeeper at music mogul Marcus Powell's estate, and she still felt like an intruder every time she walked through the ornate front gates. "You're late." Sharon, the head of housekeeping, didn't look up from her clipboard. "Third floor needs attention. Mr. Powell has guests arriving tomorrow." The third floor. Elise suppressed a shudder. Something about that floor had always felt wrong. Rooms that remained perpetually locked, strange sounds at odd hours, and staff whispers about areas they were instructed never to enter without explicit permission. "Is there a problem?" Sharon's eyes narrowed. "No, ma'am," Elise said, gathering her cleaning supplies. The marble staircase seemed to stretch endlessly upward. By the second floor, the opulence began to shift, less for show, more private. By the third, the air itself felt different. Heavier, quieter, like the mansion was holding its breath. Elise worked methodically, moving from one guest room to another. The digital clock on her cart read 11:37 p.m. when she reached the end of the hallway, the forbidden wing. A velvet rope with a discreet "staff not permitted" sign blocked the entrance. Beyond it lay several rooms she'd never entered in her months of employment. As she turned to leave, she heard it. A soft thump, followed by what sounded unmistakably like a whimper. Elise froze, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. She listened intently, telling herself it was just the house settling, or perhaps her imagination working overtime after a long shift. Then it came again. A voice, young, female, undeniably frightened. "Hello?" Elise called softly. "Is someone there?" Silence answered her. Then, "Help us." The voice was so faint she almost missed it. Fighting every instinct to turn and run, Elise ducked under the velvet rope. The hallway beyond was dimly lit, with doors spaced evenly along both sides. She moved cautiously toward the sound. "Where are you?" she whispered. "In here. Please." The voice came from behind the third door on the right, a heavy wooden door with an electronic keypad lock. Elise pressed her ear against the cool surface. "Who are you? Are you okay?" "We're not allowed to leave." Another voice now, also female, also young. "They took our phones, our IDs. They said we signed contracts." Ice flooded Elise's veins. "How many of you are in there?" 4, maybe 5 now. They brought someone new yesterday. Before Elise could respond, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed from around the corner. Heavy, purposeful footsteps. "I'll get help," she promised, her voice barely audible. "Hold on." She raced back to her cart, heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give her away. She made a show of polishing an already gleaming table when Marcus Powell's head of security, James Vega, rounded the corner. His eyes narrowed immediately. "This section is off limits to housekeeping." "I'm sorry," Elise managed, forcing a smile. "I was just finishing up the guest rooms and got turned around." Vega's expression remained impassive, but his eyes were cold as he watched her gather her supplies. "Stick to your assigned areas in the future, Ms. Mercer. Some parts of the house are private for a reason." That night, Elise couldn't sleep. The voices played on repeat in her mind. "We're not allowed to leave. They took our phones, our IDs." What had she stumbled upon? And what was she supposed to do about it? 2 weeks earlier, Beverly Hills Elise had never intended to work for the rich and famous. 6 months ago, she'd been a graduate student in social work, dreaming of opening a shelter for at-risk youth. Then her mother's cancer had returned, and suddenly the medical bills had piled higher than mountains. "This is temporary," her boyfriend Derek had reassured her when she took the housekeeping job. "Just until your mom's back on her feet." The memory of that conversation played in her mind as she sat across from him at their favorite coffee shop, her hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. "I think they're keeping girls locked up there, Derek." Her voice cracked as she spoke the words aloud for the first time. Derek's expression shifted from concern to disbelief. "At Marcus Powell's house? One of the most famous producers in the industry? Elise, do you hear yourself?" "I know how it sounds." She leaned forward. "But I heard them. They sounded scared, young. They said they weren't allowed to leave." "Maybe they're just guests who had too much to drink, or maybe they're on something and paranoid." He reached for her hand. "You've been working too hard. The stress with your mom. Don't." She pulled away. "Don't make this about my stress or my mom. I know what I heard. So what are you going to do? Call the police on Marcus Powell based on voices behind a door? You'd be fired before they even arrived, and then what happens to your mom's treatment?" The question hit like a physical blow. Her mother's life or the lives of strangers? How was that a choice anyone should have to make? "I have to do something," she whispered. Derek's eyes softened. "Just be careful, okay? People like Powell, they don't play by the same rules as the rest of us." Elise started documenting everything. The times she heard voices, the comings and goings on the third floor, the guests who arrived late at night and left before dawn. She kept her notes encrypted on her phone, hidden behind an app that looked like a period tracker. 3 nights after her discovery, she was cleaning the main living room when Powell himself entered with 2 associates. She kept her head down, invisible as always, while they settled into the leather couches. "The party on Saturday is invitation only," Powell was saying, his voice carrying the easy confidence of a man used to being obeyed. "Private rooms for VIPs on the 3rd floor, no phones, no cameras. What happens at the mansion stays at the mansion." One of the men laughed. "Those exclusive parties are why everyone wants an invitation to your place, Marcus. You deliver experiences they can't get anywhere else." "That's the point." Powell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Exclusivity equals power in this town." Elise's hands trembled as she wiped down surfaces, trying to appear busy while absorbing every word. There was nothing explicitly incriminating in their conversation, but combined with what she'd heard, it painted a disturbing picture. That night she made a decision. She couldn't go to the police, not yet, not without evidence. But she could try to gather more information. There was a staff member, Tomas, who worked security but seemed decent. Maybe he knew something. Maybe he'd help. "I need to talk to you," Elise whispered to Thomas the next day, catching him during his break, his usually friendly face turned guarded. "About what?" "The 3rd floor. The locked rooms." She swallowed hard. "The girls." For a moment, something like guilt flashed across his features, then his expression hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please," she pressed. "I heard them. They need help." Tomas stood abruptly. "You should forget whatever you think you heard. For your own good, Elise." "How can you just ignore—" "Because I have 3 kids and a mortgage," he hissed. "Because people who cross Powell don't just lose their jobs. They lose everything." He glanced around nervously. This conversation never happened. He walked away, leaving Elise alone with the weight of her knowledge and the growing certainty that she was running out of options. Later that afternoon, she was summoned to the estate manager's office. "Ms. Mercer." Sharon didn't offer her a seat. "It's come to our attention that you've been asking questions about areas of the house that don't concern you." Elise's mouth went dry. "I was just trying to understand my responsibilities better." "Your responsibilities are clearly outlined in your employment contract." Sharon slid a folder across the desk. "Unfortunately, we're terminating your employment, effective immediately." "What?" Why? The panic rose like bile in her throat. Breach of confidentiality and unauthorized access to restricted areas. Sharon's voice was clinical, detached. Security will escort you to collect your belongings. As if on cue, James Vega appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "This isn't right," Elise said, her voice shaking. "You can't just—" "We can, and we have." Sharon stood. "I suggest you leave quietly, Ms. Mercer. Reference checks in this industry are everything." The threat was clear. Speak out and she'd never work again. 1 month later. The apartment felt emptier without Derek. He'd moved out 3 weeks ago, unable to handle what he called her obsession with what had happened at the mansion. "You need help, Elise," he'd said as he packed his things. "Professional help. This paranoia, these conspiracy theories, it's not healthy." But it wasn't paranoia. She knew what she'd heard. Her mother's condition had worsened. The treatments now on hold because Elise couldn't afford them. The guilt ate at her constantly. Would her mother die because she couldn't keep her mouth shut? Because she'd chosen strangers over her own family? The local news played softly in the background as she scrolled through job listings. Nothing she qualified for would pay enough for her mother's care. Breaking news from the entertainment world. The anchorwoman's voice cut through her thoughts. Music mogul Marcus Powell's annual summer gala is set for this weekend, with A-list celebrities expected to attend the exclusive event at his Beverly Hills mansion. Elise's head snapped up. On screen, Powell smiled for the cameras, his arm around a young actress whose smile seemed fixed, her eyes hollow. Before she could stop herself, Elise had picked up her phone and was dialing a number she'd saved weeks ago but never had the courage to call. Los Angeles Times investigative desk. She took a deep breath. "My name is Elise Mercer. I used to work for Marcus Powell, and there's something you need to know about what happens in his mansion." The silence on the other end lasted only a moment. "I'm listening." As she began to speak, the weight that had pressed on her chest for weeks began to lift. She didn't know if anyone would believe her. She didn't know if she could prove anything. But for the first time since hearing those voices behind the locked door, she felt something like hope. Perhaps the truth, once spoken, would find its own way to light. If this story shocked you, subscribe because the next one is even more incredible.